My name is Angela Pillar. I'm the collections manager at the Rice Museum. That covers a lot of different types of work, so it really does cover some curatorial work, sometimes some event planning work, but generally what I do is I make sure that the collection is kept safe, is preserved, and is made available for people to see. I've been here for almost 4 years now. And before that, I volunteered for about another 4 years. So I've been with the museum going on almost 10 years in total now, both as a volunteer and then as an employee. So I started volunteering here just because I like rocks and minerals. I have a degree in geology. And the more that I volunteered here, the more I started working with the current curator and helping her out with projects and sort of becoming, like more of an intern assistant type person. And then when there was an opening in the position, I said, would you be willing to give me a try? Because I have a background in geology, I have experience with this specific museum, and then also, some of my various other background experience working really in corporate jobs, seemed like it might be a good fit for this. So I don't know, I really like working here, but there was an opening and I said, hey, you want to give me a try as intern? And then they did, and then that turned into a full-time job. I'd always be filling my pockets with rocks at the beach, and I had a little rock collection out in the garden when I was a kid. And thinking back, I know that I definitely found some zeolites, but didn't know what they were. I remember seeing some small little interesting things in pockets in basalt. I wouldn't have known it was basalt at that time either, but yeah, always been collecting rocks. But I took a long time to get here though. I also worked for a while in life insurance. And one day I decided, it's time that I kind of go back to my dream and go back to school and get that geology degree and see what I can do with that. And that was a really good decision. My usual working day, I'll come in, check my email. I'll usually have a couple of requests for someone who wants to know something about the collection, someone who's interested in making a donation, or someone who's interested in some sort of a rock identification question. And so I'll kind of work through some of those, and we've got our set answers for some of those. Like some of those are like rock IDs. We have Mystery Mineral Day, and we'd love to have you come in for that. A really cool thing about working here is that we're such a small museum that we can make quick decisions and pivot and change and fill in any sort of when an interesting opportunity comes up, we can take it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So if someone says, have you ever considered doing this? And they offer an opportunity, it's something that we can jump on, even if we've never considered it. We can say hang on, maybe we should do that. My average day would usually include planning for upcoming special displays or events. So we have a Minecraft day coming up, so I'm working on planning a way to put in a display that sort of brings home the connection between the video game Minecraft and the rocks and minerals found in that game and what those minerals are like in the real world. So finding a way to communicate science in a way that can hit people at a variety of different levels, because not everyone has played Minecraft, so there still needs to be a display that's interesting to someone who's never played Minecraft. Some people play Minecraft but don't know that they're that interested in rocks and minerals, and this potentially will show them that connection that they're interested in, or help them find out that they're not. And then there's also probably some parents that underestimate, Minecraft and other, types of media like that for educational purposes, or drawing connections, having any relation to the real world. And I'm pretty excited to put together some stuff that kind of helps bring all that together. I will also spend some time in the galleries usually. We're a small group, so we fill in doing all sorts of things. So I'll be answering questions, I'll go around and clean fingerprints off of glass. Depending on what our staffing level's like that day, I'll probably take a short stint working in the gift shop while someone takes a break. We don't have a purchasing budget at the moment, so, again, small museum. So we're not purchasing anything, but a lot of times people will offer donations, and when they do, I will say to them, there are several ways that your donation can benefit the museum. I'll say, if there is a gap in our collection, if we don't have something that represents this type of specimen or something like it, it could go on display. It could go into the collection. Alternatively, it could be used for educational purposes. It could be used for something hands-on or as a demonstration or something that we take when we do like traveling education stuff. You know, we go to schools and do like a little mini museum sort of show or something, or if we go to an outreach program, something like that. Third way something could be useful is it goes into our gift shop. We're helping to get, you know, something back into the hands of a collector or a kid who is excited about that material, and then the proceeds from that literally go to help keep the lights on at the museum. Oh, and then the last one, the fourth way, it can go into our rock pile, and that's for everyone who comes to the museum gets a free rock. So a lot of times people sort of think, oh, you know, I have some rocks, but it's just like some leftover stuff. I was putting in a new patio. And like, actually, you know, if that was some, you know, aventurine, or if that was some, you know, a beautiful rock like that, people will really enjoy finding that in the rock pile. The rock pile is kind of there for younger people and other people that might otherwise have difficulty going out in the field and finding a rock, but so that everyone can kind of get that joy out of like searching and hunting and finding, you know, an exciting rock for themselves. So once something has been donated, and one thing about donation is, like I just said, letting the donor know that I cannot promise that it's going to be displayed. And if that is going to be an issue, donation might not be the right path for them. It might be more that they are interested in loaning something to us specifically for display if we're interested in that display. Or, you know, once something becomes property of the museum, it's one of those things where we'll do what is most beneficial for the museum with that item. So the first thing, if something's donated, if it's likely, if I look at it and assess that this is a good match for the collection, next I would go to our board of directors, and our collections committee would review it and say, is this something that we should put in the collection? And this is part of a museum where you have to be really careful about these things, because it's hard to put things into a collection. It's hard to take things out of a collection into a formal collection. And that's because both this protects the nature of the collection and keeps people from removing things that should have stayed in it or removing things for some sort of financial gain. Not something that would ever happen at this museum, but historically at museums, that's a thing that has happened. People will sell things out of the collection, which is not appropriate to do when the collection belongs to the public. You know, it exists for the public to get to see and get to look at and get to use. So that getting something into the collection would need to be reviewed, I guess, would be the sort of that first thing to say, is that appropriate? The reason that there's so much sort of review process is because caring for an item and storing an item takes time and money. And when you have only a limited amount of storage space, you have to be careful. Anything you add to your storage space means less storage space for something else. So if you take in, you know, a huge collection of pumice, for example, you know, pumice not being particularly hard to find, and something where you might not need more than 2 or 3 pieces of pumice to be able to communicate or demonstrate what pumice is. If you took in 50 pieces, then that might hold space that you would rather have something else, you know, in that space, something more educational or more valuable. But getting back to the process of how something would get in, I would document it. I would take photos of it. I would measure its dimensions. I have a database that all this information would go into. And so every item that goes into the collection gets assigned a number. We call them RM numbers here, RM for Rice Museum, but every museum has their own cataloging number and cataloging number style. So every item that goes into the collection will get a unique identifier number. That number will be attached to the specimen in some way. If the specimen is something that needs prep or cleaning, that's also something that I would document, and I wouldn't put it immediately on display. I would, again, run that past our board of directors and say, here is how I propose to care for this specimen. If it's something simple like it has dirt on it, I need to run it under a faucet, I wouldn't need to run that pass. But a lot of specimens will require something like there's a calcite buildup on there. We need to, clean this off with some acid or with an etching tool or something like that. And that's the sort of thing that to make sure that the collection's being cared for properly, we document all those sort of things and say like, yes, do we approve this, or do we approve putting funds towards this if it's not something I'm going to do, if we're going to send it out to a professional. So that would be the steps to getting something into the collection. To get it onto display, if it was, say, a Northwest specimen or a fine mineral specimen that already fit into one of our existing exhibits, it would be as simple as, I would find a space for it, I'd print up a label for it. The label would need to say what the specimen is, what the chemical formula is for it, if it's something with a chemical formula, if it's a, like a mineral. If it's a rock or a fossil, I wouldn't need to be worrying about that. It'll say as much information as we have about where it was found. It will say who the donor was, assuming that the donor wants to be credited. So that's something that I would always check with first and say, do you want to be credited and how do you want to be credited? Some people will say, I would like to be credited. I'd like this to be listed as a gift on behalf of so-and-so. They want it to, honor like someone else in their family or something. So, we're always happy to do that. And then it would go into the display case. Anything that's water soluble, we have some nice halite specimens in the collection. We've also been offered some really nice halite specimens as donations, and I've turned some of those down. Living in the Northwest, it's really difficult for us to safely store something like that. That would require a lot of desiccant packs. So that is the sort of thing where if I don't feel like we have a way to safely care for that, I would rather not have it at the museum until we've solved that problem than take it in and let it be destroyed or damaged. In the Northwest, with the humid sort of nature and the rain nature, like the thing I think about the most is anything that can be damaged by water. But there are some other fragile things, like a rhodochrosite specimen. I've got a rhodochrosite cut gem, and it's the sort of thing that is very sensitive to temperature change. Even just from like holding it in the palm of your hand, you can end up, damaging it. So there's a couple things that need to be sort of like labeled and set aside. Conversely, there are some things that couldn't harm me or other people working with them. We've got some radioactive specimens that are labeled and packed away. We've got some asbestos-related minerals. Those are all kind of marked with like, wear breathing material and open with caution and think about what you're doing.
Do you have that problem with the meteorites at all?
The meteorites, yes, those I do need to keep. Most of them don't rust too badly. Some of our pieces have been coated to protect from rust. Some of them we have multiple pieces of, and there's one that actually we purposely have allowed one piece to rust and the other to not, to show the comparison between the two. We've got a touchable meteorite out here that we like to tell visitors that it's important for them to touch, because that's the way we're preserving this one, is by letting them touch it, and the oils from their hands are coating it and keeping it from rusting, because it's an iron meteorite. Some of the meteorites, I do always make sure those are stored in basically a human comfortable temperature range, so no extreme highs, no extreme lows, basically. As far as moisture, yeah, I'm careful, same thing, keep them in like sort of a human comfortable area. I actually haven't felt the need to build a personal collection because I get to work with this collection all the time. So the things in my personal collection that are most prized are things that I've collected myself, and they don't look like much, It's like, that's a shiny rock I picked up in Montana, but then I did my research and I was like, this rock is so old, stuff like that. So a couple prized things I have, I do have a small point of, small quartz point with a little piece of pyrite on it from Spruce Ridge. As far as Spruce Ridge specimens go, it's nothing special. It's tiny, it's attractive, but it's emotionally important to me because of who gave it to me. It was given to me by Linda Harvey, who passed away recently, but was one of the part owners of Spruce Ridge and also a volunteer who's been very involved at the museum. But yeah, no, I as a personal collector, I am not collecting much at all. You know, like not on the scale that you would call a mineral collector. More like a rock hound.
If you could only have one type of stone or mineral, what would it be?
Personally or for the museum?
I think personally.
Personally, wolfenite.
That used to be my favorite mineral, yeah.
That, like, I just love it. I just really enjoy that mineral. I love the colors it comes in. I can see that a smarter choice might be something like a calcite or fluorite that has so many different forms and colors, but wolfenite, I like oranges, I like yellows, and I just really love the way that wolfenite specimens look.
Sure.
Yeah, I know, right? I also really like, I like orange. Generally, I'm looking at things that will surprise people who come to the museum, that, you know, things that they look at and say, like, I can't believe that's a natural thing. I can't believe that happened. So while it's not a particularly rare mineral, like one of those oversized amethyst geodes that you can like walk into and take your picture in or something like that would be something I would love to add to the collection. Specifically for its like how much joy and wonder that brings people. You know, as far as appearance, you know, like thinking of specimens to collect, like there's plenty of gaps in the collection and there's all this new localities that people are finding all the time. But when I think of other things that would be a good fit that we could use better specimens of, it's also very visual things like that. So, you know, the calcites that are covered with pyrite or chalcopyrite that, you know, sort of remind you of like a, you know, fairy tale sort of situation. They're ridiculous sort of like rainbow specimens, or like grape agate, that sort of thing. So like large attractive specimens of stuff like that. Inventorying is crucial, which may sound obvious, but I have met a significant number of collectors that rely entirely on their memory to keep track of what they have and where they have it. And then that leads to awkward situations where you loan something to someone, to a museum or to an individual, or you send something off for cleaning, and then it doesn't come back in the time that you expect, and you don't have very good documentation on where it might have went. So even on a small scale collection, you know, I mentioned that I have small, my collection at home is like pebbles and cobbles and stuff like that, but I do inventory them. So I do keep an inventory of like, this is item number this, it's located in box this. And I make some notes about where it's from, because that's always something that you think you'll remember, and then eventually you look at it and you're like, wait, I have 5 red stones. 2 of them look like one thing, the other one looks like something else, and the last one I can't match to anything that I remember. And so doing that sort of stuff by guess, like I'm a big fan of the inventory. And I guess part of it is, if you're displaying your items, you also want to choose, you want to choose a style for your display. So you could be doing a visual display, and so that's just purely aesthetic, and you want to make sure that you've got varied appearances of things next to each other. You know, almost like a cabinet of curiosities sort of like display if you're displaying your home collection. Or you can sort them by locality. So you can say like, this one is from Mexico and this one is also from Mexico, so I'm putting them next to each other. They're 2 different mineral specimens, but then you get a really cool display of like showing the breadth of what can be found from one particular location. Or you can organize them by chemistry, which is also fun, you know, put your silicates together. And then that sort of shows what kind of minerals are possible with specific chemistry. And out of those, I don't necessarily have a preference. I can see merits to all of those.
Do you label the rocks directly, or do you just keep them with labels? Because that was one thing I always struggled with, was what if it separates from the label? What do I do?
I like to label everything directly, but it depends a lot on your specimen whether there's a spot that you're okay with having something attached. With the museum's collection, the way we deal with that is it's so important to keep track of what each item is. that it's very unusual that we won't label the specimen. One exception would be cut gems, and in that case we would label the gem jar that they stay in or any other item that they're in, and those would also be measured so specifically that you would still be able to match them up. So there'd be a written description that says visually what they look like. We'd measure the carat weight, we'd measure the dimensions, we'd list what cut the gem was, so that even if it got separated from any other sort of labeling, you should be able to match it back up again. But with most things, I will put a label on. I use an acid-free pen. I write on acid-free paper, which basically any printer paper is going to be acid-free. Just read the label. And then I use an archival quality glue to just sort of like paint a little glue onto the specimen, lay the piece of paper that has either the handwritten, or you could do like a printed out printer piece of paper too, something that you typed up if your handwriting's not that great. And I lay another layer of glue over the top of that, so it's sort of sealed between, the paper's sealed between the two layers of glue. The archival glue is water soluble, so if you don't like where you put it, or you want to remove it from your collection, give it to someone else, or if you realize that you put it, like on the front of your specimen when you display it and you're like, oh, that looks ridiculous, you can wash it right off. So that works well with everything except for water-soluble minerals. But yeah, that's the way I do it, in addition to having some sort of a box label. So there will be a label stored with each piece, as well as each piece will have a label on it. So it's sort of a redundant system that way too. So we got a little piece of rhodochrosite here. Let's see, my label here says that this is from Santa Rita Mine in Peru. So it's a really lovely specimen I found. This is one of the things about having a larger collection, that sometimes it feels like I'm saying things like found. Now we've got an inventory, I know where everything is, but there's enough things where there's still things that, I haven't seen or haven't seen several times, and so it feels like finding something. So this is what I found and said, that's beautiful. I think that would be really nice to have that on display. But you can see that this is sort of the front display side of the piece. The back of the piece is sort of flattened, and then this is where we've got the RM number. So that's what I was talking about with RM stands for Rice Museum. This one's RM 8177. So if you saw this item on display and it had a label that said RM 8177, you could ask me, I need more information about that piece, and I'd be able to look it up in the database, and I'd be able to tell you the whole background of that piece.
So is there an RM0001?
Yes.
Is that the
yeah, point? So the collection starts with 001, but this numbering system started before even the museum started, so it's a complete inventory. Every number only gets used once. So some things have left the collection. Things get deaccessioned from a collection when you add new things to a collection that are, a better specimen of the same thing, or when something gets damaged, when something gets lost. And before we were formally a museum, when this was the Rice family's collection, they would trade and sell things out of their collection sometimes too. As a museum, that's not something you do without running it past your board of directors, your collections committee, and doing, some documentation on why you would do it. And it needs to be for a reason, like this is a triplicate, we don't have the storage space, we can't store this safely, that sort of thing. Like I was talking about earlier, there are safeguards in place to make sure that a collection is maintained safely and responsibly. So another piece that I grabbed for you here is a lovely little piece of copper from Bisbee, Arizona. So you can see some copper crystal growth going on in there too. So this is one that would be a little more difficult to figure out what's the front, what's the back, and where does the label go. But on this one, it went right here. So that's RM1705. The way that our system works, the numbers are based on how early it entered the collection. And that's not always consistent, but if it's something that is a 1705, I can feel pretty confident that this is something that the Rices collected before we were a museum. A lot of labels will fall off. This is definitely not the original label that this one would have had. The original Rice labels would have been fabric labels. So this is something that's been added more recent. They were fabric labels, glued on in the same way, with handwritten with pen. And so then this is the display label for this piece too. So you can see it says it's donated by Richard and Helen Rice. So that means this one was donated in 1997 when the collection was donated to form this museum as a nonprofit. And the RM number on here is that same RM number. So this is the information that as a visitor, if you saw this on display, you would see this and this. I would display it in a way where you wouldn't be able to see that RM number most likely, because that's generally intended to be for internal reference if something gets separated from its label. But you would see this, and this has all the information you'd want. The information in the database that might not be on here might be whose collection this was in before it was in the Rice collection, who they purchased it from or traded it from, or if it's something that they self-collected. If it has any sort of an interesting history of being damaged and repaired, we would have a valuation of it, or valuation sometimes as of different dates. We have a valuation of things for insurance purposes, but also since this has been a long-lasting collection, sometimes there will also be the purchase price, which is really fun to see for some of the original collection, because a lot of the prices will say something like $5. And then you'll look at it and say like, don't know what it's worth, but it's more than $5. So, and a lot of times there will be comments, you know, so like this one's from Bisbee, Arizona, which is a pretty famous location. So this might have been out of someone else's collection, or this might be someone may have stopped by the museum at some point, pointed at this and told us a story about it, which is not all that uncommon. Someone will say, oh, you know, my father used to work in Bisbee, and you know, he was in the mine, and he remembers seeing this piece, or he remembers seeing a piece like this. And so that sort of stuff goes in our database too, when people have stories associated with a piece.
Cool.
We've got the main house, and that's the historic Rice family house, the house that the Rice family used to live in when they had their exhibit cases down below. Everything in there has been converted into galleries with rocks, minerals, fossils, gems, meteorites, gold, all the good things. A couple things to not miss, I guess I would say, going through that part of the museum would be we've got a rainbow gallery, and that's fluorescent minerals, and it shows how they glow under long wave and short wave light. We've got a special exhibit section. There's always going to be something changing in there. Right now it's gem carvings by Naomi Sarna. I think they're really beautiful. Our main gallery downstairs has some of the most extraordinary specimens, and that's really what makes our museum special, is some of the outstanding specimens we have down there, including the Alma Rose rhodochrosite. The Petrified Wood Gallery downstairs, a really outstanding, large, one of the largest probably in one place collections of petrified wood. Most varied, I would say, anyway, large collection. And yeah, that's sort of like the overview of the main house. Then we also have a separate gallery, and that is the Northwest Gallery, and everything in there is from the Pacific Northwest or represents something from the Northwest. So we've got zeolites, we've got thunder eggs, we've got fossils in petrified wood, sunstones. Sunstones are Oregon State gem, and thunder eggs are Oregon State rock. So we've got those in there. We don't have any Jory soil on display right now, but that's Oregon State soil. But I have some in my office if anyone asks. In the 1950s, Richard and Helen Rice built this house. This was about the same time that Highway 26 out there was being constructed. So you can picture that it was sort of a different place and a different time. A big wooded property, which we're still on a large wooded property. Richard and Helen built this house because they needed a place to house their collection. So the downstairs was a collection area, and a gallery where they put their collection, and the upstairs was living space. And that was the way it was even when they built the house. But they weren't always collectors with a large collection like that. So actually what happened is they went to the Oregon coast and picked up a couple of agates, and in the case we've actually got a couple of those first agates that they picked up. They took them to a local rock shop, they got those polished, and they said, wow, I really like this. This is going to be our hobby. And so they started out being rock hounds. They joined local rock hounding groups. They started meeting other people with similar interests to them. They discovered that there weren't enough local groups in their area, so they started getting pretty active in the groups. So Oregon Agate and Mineral Society and the Tualatin Valley Gem Club, Richard and Helen had positions leading these clubs, a lot of volunteer work, basically creating the community that we have around here today. That's all a result of their work, and Helen Rice in particular. So and there weren't chapters of some of the clubs around here, so they formed the chapters themselves. They started holding meetings. Once they had the house here, they would often host the meetings here at the house too. Richard and Helen, even before this was a museum with their collection, would go to the Tucson Gem and Mineral Show every year. They kind of helped found that show. They were really involved in some of the early years there. And then ever since, the museum will take an exhibit every year too. So we've had a presence there probably since, within 5 years of the very beginning, I would say. So Richard and Helen had 3 daughters that also moved into this house with them. They would have been teenagers at about the time they moved into this house. And one of them is still with us, Charlene. The other 2 have passed away, but Charlene was really instrumental in helping this become a museum, and is also quite a collector herself. Richard Rice did a lot of gem faceting and jewelry making, and Helen Rice collected micromounts, as well as thumbnails, and has a whole separate collection that we have of small minerals that, in addition to what we consider the museum's main collection. Richard Rice was a logger, and Helen Rice was a housewife. So a lot of times they would travel in the colder times of the year, and they would go to Mexico and Arizona. And so a lot of their favorite collecting places are in those warmer areas where you would go when it's not practical or possible to do logging, in the Northwest. So a lot of Mexican opal collecting, a lot of amethyst, some of the selenite from the Nika mine in Mexico. So Naomi has come out to the museum several times and taught classes as well. So sometimes we'll have artists come out and do carving classes and stuff like that. And it's likely that she'll hold some of those again, demonstrating the technique that she uses to carve this stuff, which is actually a pretty accessible technique. It's kind of, she uses a specialized Dremel, but you can achieve it with a normal Dremel. So this is the Murphy Gallery. Everything in here is on loan from the Murphy family. So the Murphy family is another family a lot like the Rice family that had a passion for collecting. So their story starts when they went into a rock shop and saw a pair of bookends made out of petrified wood. And that's actually a pair that's over here in the corner. So when they saw these bookends, they said, Mary Murphy said, these are really beautiful. I would love to have these, but they're too expensive. And so, they left, and then her husband went back in and bought them for her. And then after that, they took these home, they kind of looked at them, and they're like, petrified wood is gorgeous. This is something that we could do. Like, we can find this stuff, we can cut this stuff, we can polish this stuff. So this is essentially a similar situation of, something that starts small turns into a large collection. So we've got petrified wood in here from all over the world, lots of Northwest locations, lots of Arizona locations, all sorts of different colors and materials and types of tree, and all of them collected and polished by the Murphy family on their hand-built equipment, because they built specialized equipment to be able to work with such large pieces like this. One of my favorites over here, the Torito wood, or the shipwood, the shipworm borings. not actually, they're more like ocean worms, shellfish sort of things, less like actual worms, but the textures of the infill from where the worms have sort of carved in there is beautiful. I love the look of this piece. Another one of my favorites, and a lot of visitors' favorite actually, is this collection of cubes that we have. So this is sort of a visual representation of many different species, and just a cube of each one. Now, it's really hard to identify petrified wood based on appearance alone. The color in petrified wood is going to represent the mineralogy, the whatever minerals replace the wood. So you can't go by color. You have to look at a microscopic level, generally, at the cells of the tree to be able to identify the type of tree. But looking at this, you still can see that there's some generalizations you can make about some of them and say, like, the textures that will show up in different types of petrified wood. And I'd say my one exception, the only type of petrified wood that I will ever offer to identify for someone is fossil palm, like this piece here, because of that, palm not really being a tree per se, much more of a grass.
Yeah,
It's got that polka dot look. Yeah.
I like the occasional scattered butterflies.
Right. Yep, there's some butterflies. There's some really amazing spheres in here too. Giant spheres of petrified wood. And yeah, another favorite of mine is the pine cones. It's just, some pretty outstanding pine cone shapes. And there's a couple others over on the other side too. One of those was actually found when Mary Murphy was camping, and she stepped out of her trailer and she tripped over it. She's like, you can't trip over a pine cone. So this one must be petrified, and she picked it up, and now it's in the collection. And a cool thing about petrified wood is you'll look at it and be like, this is a piece of wood. And you pick it up and you're like, that is a lot heavier. You can really feel that it's like stone. That doesn't feel like wood, but it looks like wood. This is the Fool's Gallery. Watch your head there. Got sort of low lights. This is the Fool's Gallery, one of our changing exhibits. We actually like to change up our exhibits a lot to, we don't consider that the museum isn't someplace you can come to once. There's always going to be something different because we've got so much more collection and storage that we need to switch things out so that things get to be seen. But this is the Fool's Gallery. The idea behind it is that it has things that are fake but look real, things that are real but look fake, and then also some other oddities. So these are fake fossils, but you might think that they're real. There's some real bone in there, there's some real fossil teeth in there, but they are not the teeth of the animal that they imply that they are. Synthetic minerals down here on the bottom. So these are man-made items, human-made items, but beautiful minerals and crystal forms regardless. Some faceted gems up here. In fact, some of these are Fred Van Sant's gems in here too. And these are synthetic materials, but the faceting work is still real craftsmanship, real artwork. So that's almost a question of, do you consider that real or fake? Because synthetic growth, real artwork.
Yeah, it's basically still chemically the same. It's just synthetic
Absolutely.
instead of naturally occurring.
Yep. And then we've got some pseudomorphs, so minerals are taking the form after other minerals. One of my favorites, even though, it's not necessarily too showy, but this is a pineapple opal. So that's kind of one of those rare finds, only found in one place in the world, and opal would not normally have a crystal form. Opal's not something that can form crystals, but this makes it look like it has formed crystals. And yeah, we've got some fool's gold down here, iron pyrite. So there are actually 14 pieces of fool's gold in here and 1 piece of real gold. So that's a fun quiz.
Leave your guess down in the comments.
Yeah. I got some polyhedroid agates. So polyhedroid agates are things that, in the category of things that are natural forms that look like they might be human-made or shaped and polished. So these have been sliced and polished to reveal the inside, but the triangular shapes, the polyhedroid shapes that they have, that's how they naturally form. And then we've got the top shelf up here, and these are other real minerals that you might look at and say, that looks like something that was made by a human. Some of the bright colors, the unusual shapes. But this exhibit won't be here for very much longer. We're going to be putting in a Minecraft exhibit that will be our next exhibit in here. I get excited when I see a kid come in wearing a Minecraft shirt, because I know he or she has something in their mind that they're like, I'm here to see the lapis. I'm here to see the diamond. You know, and it's kids saying names of rocks and gems and stuff that they're interested in that they wouldn't otherwise probably have encountered. So Minecraft's a pretty cool gateway, so to speak, I think, to geology. So this is the main gallery. This part of the house, this is what it was like when the Rices lived upstairs in the house. So this is the gallery that they built downstairs to house their collection. Now, of course, this is not only the Rice family's original collection, this is the whole museum's collections. There's much more of our worldwide mineral collection in here. You know, one of the sort of prize things in here is the Alma Rose rhodochrosite, somewhat of a famous piece, but even if you're not familiar with it, it pretty much stands out when you see the size of those large, sharp, gemmy rhodochrosite crystals. You know, a lot of times rhodochrosite will be found more in a stalagmite or a coating type form, or smaller crystals if they're gemmy crystals like that. And this one is from Colorado, from the Sweet Home Mine. And there are a couple other pieces in the family. There's the Alma King and the Alma Queen, and those are at other museums. And this one is ours that's here. Other pretty special things that are in here, you know, these actual stalactite slices of rhodochrosite from Argentina. Just really visually enjoyable too. The variscite, large variscite nodules that have been sliced open, we've got a pretty large collection of that, and those are, you know, from this location, from the Clay Canyon location, that's impossible to find anymore. Variscite itself can be found, but not with the deeper green color like that, and not at that location. We do have a display that I'm working on right now that's going to be backlit slices of tourmaline. I almost forgot about that. I probably need to work on that today. They're in a custom-built display that puts them on a light box, and then there's sort of some black plexi that blocks out the light from the rest of it. So it's been cut specifically to the shape of the slices. That'll be upstairs. So that's going to be a great one. So a lot of the materials chosen to build the house out of are very specific to the Richard and Helen Rice's passion both for beauty and the natural world. So a lot of their decisions, you might not necessarily notice at first, but when you hear about it, it's really interesting. So like the sandstone over here, this is the same sandstone you'll see on the fireplace, on the planters, on the outside of the house. And this is Coconino sandstone from Arizona. So this sandstone, because they enjoyed spending time collecting rocks and minerals in Arizona when they built their house, they bought a trainload of this particular sandstone brick and had it brought out here by train to the closest, train station to here, and then someone transported the rest of the way when the house was built and brought it to here. And so that's what's been used as the material for the house. A lot of the wood in the house, we've got a lot of quilted maple or bird's eye maple. We have a lot of myrtle wood. There is some special like brushed pine under the eaves, and all these choices are specific to what Richard Rice, a professional logger, found beauty in, right? The myrtlewood tree, someone said to him like, hey, it's not too often to find like a large myrtlewood tree. And they said like, we found a myrtlewood tree, are you interested? And he's like, yes, I'll be right there. And he went and logged it personally, the myrtlewood tree that they used for the wood in the house. In their travels, the Rices spent a lot of time in Mexico collecting or on vacation. Both, of course. You can't take a vacation without collecting rocks and minerals. And that's where all the tile work in the house came from local artisans in Mexico. So there's a lot of beautiful handcrafted, hand-painted tile. This downstairs is sort of the downstairs small entertaining kitchen. It's connected by a dumbwaiter to the upstairs kitchen. But this is, right down here with the main gallery. So what you could do is you could, make up some snacks upstairs, put them in the dumbwaiter, bring them downstairs, or you could, the little panini press back here would have been called a sandwich press at the time probably. Heat up some snacks, tomato soup and grilled cheese. I've heard some visitors say they were served by Richard and Helen Rice when they came here as a kid. And you get to enjoy that in the gallery while you're enjoying the collection. No, we don't do that anymore at the museum, except during special events. So don't expect a grilled cheese unless there's a special grilled cheese event.
And you're going to turn that into a display case?
Yeah. So this was the dumbwaiter over here. I can pull this guy back down so you can see. So this is where the dumbwaiter is, and this is that myrtle wood and maple paneling that we've got throughout. And so the dumbwaiter space has been empty, unused space, and we're going to turn this into a display case. So it's both a window where you can look into the faceting classroom and see people working on gems, but there will also be gems faceted by the Faceting Guild on display in this case too that you can see. The Faceters Guild rents a space from us here in the museum and teaches faceting classes. So complete introductory level classes. Basically all that's required is that you have an interest in faceting, and they'll start you from there. They'll provide the materials, all the equipment, everything you need. There's usually a waiting list for the class. It's really quite popular, but there's a classroom setting where there's a variety of different faceting machines that you can use. They'll teach you how to use the machine. You'll end up with at least one faceted gem. There'll be a couple different designs that you can choose from, but they'll usually recommend like a round brilliant or something appropriate to the material you're working with. And sometimes people have time to do two stones in the class too, and so then you get a chance to work with more than one material or a chance to try different types of machines. They have regular meetings where they bring in lecturers. Like for everyone, COVID brought some pretty good opportunities to bring in some remote lectures and stuff too, so they've been able to continue on with that, not only pulling from local people and also people from all over the world. Let's see, we also usually have some stones exhibited from the Columbia Willamette Facetors Guild here at the museum. We have a new exhibit case we're going to be putting in the next month or so that'll feature stones faceted by members of the guild. One really cool thing that sometimes we're able to put on display is award-winning stones that were faceted by people who learned to facet in our classroom, which is always really cool to be able to say, like, you can do this too, right? Like, this person started from like, hey, I wonder what faceting is, and then is now an award-winning faceter, and it doesn't necessarily, take that much time if it's a skill that you really feel passionate about and put the time into.
Yeah, I think a class is certainly enough to know you'll know if it's for you or not if you cut a stone.
Yeah.
Even if it's a little frustrating at times, seeing the end result is enough for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I want to do that again.
Yeah, I want to do a little more of that. So this is the faceting lab, and in this classroom, the volunteers from the Columbia Willamette Faceting Guild teach. So all the teachers are volunteers. They do this for free because they love faceting. and they want to share the art, which I understand is different than some other sort of older art forms, or perhaps how this might be treated in other countries, that being willing to share sort of a, sharing your knowledge like this, so you're sharing your skill set. Right. A lot of places it would be like a journeyman type thing, right? Like you're learning it because this is going to become your career, not because it's going to be your hobby. So it's an interesting thing. So this is a classroom style place we've got Facetron and Ultratech machines in here. So 2 different kinds, whether you like the more manual gauge based thing, or if you enjoy the digital readout. I've used both and find them both pretty pleasant. So students come in and have the opportunity to try working on different machines. They get a Facet 1 gem. So they will learn. Yep, this is set up and ready for class. It's going to happen this weekend. They'll learn what this page means. They'll learn how to read this page, and they'll learn how to cut this gem, and they'll go home with this gem. So everyone's going to get to pick out a piece on a DOP that matches whatever their machine is, whether it's the Ultratech or the Facetron. And so these are all prepared for the next class, and they'll turn these into gems. And there is a little example piece here of how the process works. So this sort of takes you through the steps. This is what you learn in the classes, how to do each of these steps, how to do the cutting, the grinding in each step, then the polishing. All of this work up to here is on the bottom of the stone, making that point of the stone, if you picture like a traditional diamond shape. This is the transfer, when you're going to flip it over from one piece to the other so that you can access the other side. Then you'll work on the top of the gem, and then here we have the last step, time to brag.
Historical items to talk about here.
Yeah, so I've got a collection of Fred Van Sant's gems and Fred Van Sant's faceting machine here. We actually have it. I have that turned around backwards. Anyway, Fred Van Sant's faceting machine here. So Fred Van Sant kind of designed the modern faceting machine. Like all the machines that you see in this classroom are, would not have been possible without this machine that Fred Van Sant designed. He had to build this by hand. Obviously faceting is an old craft, and he wasn't the first person to facet, but he was the first person to design and attempt some of the shortcuts that make it possible for modern machines to work the way they do. And so we've had his collection was donated to the museum, including the machine that he faceted the gems on. The collections of gems that was donated is the example cuts for all his gem designs.
And so I'm kind of ignorant about the faceting history.
Mm-hmm.
I know a number of very famous American facetors were from the Pacific Northwest. Was Fred Van Sant from the area?
California area. Yeah.
And then what's the connection that his material ended up here? Was it the guilds specifically? Do you know? Or?
I don't actually know. Like that is a question. Don't know if you want to include that, but that's a question I ask myself all the time. But I mention it and bring it out because I know that it is the one and only place to see some of his stuff. So.
Yeah, he was a very prolific designer for sure.
Yes, and
these are almost all test cuts.
Yeah.
Designs.
Yeah. So.
That he made as well. His test cuts.
Yes, they are his test cuts.
Yes.
So they're his designs and also his test cuts. He did all the faceting on those. And so they should be labeled on the bottom there too. And almost all of these are synthetic materials. Synthetic material makes for a very predictable faceting experience. So since Fred Van Sant was focusing on the design, that made it a good choice for him. One of my favorites that is in here, I'm not sure if there's one on this one, is I really like the pixel cut. Oh, this is one. When you sort of take that and...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've cut a few of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So we got a couple larger ones. I need to get that under the light there, but oh, there's something on it. I wonder if it has a little scratch on it. That might not be a great example. That's too bad. It's a leaded glass.
I have a little bit of leaded glass that I've been putting off faceting just because you have to be careful of the lead.
So yeah.
Got to clean everything before and after and all that stuff. But yeah, it looks pretty nice when it's
yeah, oh, it
faceted
shines.
well.
It shines really nice, yeah. So this is the sort of thing we have at the museum that isn't always out on display. But this is the sort of thing that, I'm always happy to have someone reach out to me and say, hey, I'm curious about this, or I'd like to see this, or I'd like to learn more about this. And we'd schedule an appointment for someone to come out and take a look and spend some time with things that are in the collection. So everything in the collection is, potentially available, but some of it you would have to make an appointment just because it'll take some time to pull it out. Northwest Gallery. So everything you find in here is from the Northwest, or represents something from the Northwest. The first thing that's really going to jump out at you is probably going to be this large thunder egg. We've got this one out. It's touchable. The only thing we ask is that people don't climb on it, not because they're going to hurt the thunder egg, but because they'll hurt themselves. So it's a thunder egg so big you could climb on, which I guess is sort of an interesting thing. We call this the world's largest opal-filled thunder egg. So this whole inside area here is opal. And this is from Opal Butte, Morrow County, Oregon. So big that you wouldn't really be able to slice it nicely, so you can see that this has been hand carved and polished. I'm sure with, equipment, but even then, that would take forever to have to get this, yeah. First couple cases in here are cases curated by local rock clubs. So we've got one right now on Mount St. Helens. Visitors I really enjoy actually seeing visitors tell the story of the volcano that they saw erupt when they were young to their kids or grandkids, and sort of having the realization that that is something that they may have not shared with other people before, that is a really interesting part of their life, that they have that memory. This one's from the Mount Hood Rock Club here in Gresham, Oregon. So this case just got put in yesterday, so I even haven't had a chance to look at all the pieces. They're really, some really cool finds in here, but these are self-collected rocks by members. Most of them are from the Northwest. One or two of them is not from the Northwest. But each one of these is going to have a little card next to it that'll say what it is and who collected it, and if they know where, and kept track of where they collected it, what they know about the location and the material and stuff. This, it's sort of like an opportunity for us to let museum visitors know that there are rock clubs. So if they come to the museum, get excited about rocks, and they're like, okay, what's next? We're like, let me introduce you to a whole bunch of other people that feel the same way you do. You're going to want to check out one of these rock clubs. But it's also an opportunity for rock club members to get to have something on display in a museum and get to share their collection or their most interesting item. And I really like it because it brings a personal touch to the museum. One thing that sometimes with a large collection of rocks is that you're focusing on the rocks and you can't always see the person behind the rock, the person who collected the rock or the person who loved the rock or polished the rock or faceted the rock. And I feel like these club cases always really kind of bring it back to the individual sort of thing. So it's like a personal connection sort of thing.
Every rock has a story, really.
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of personal touches, you have the zeolite collection.
Absolutely. So this is Rudy Chernich. Almost every item in here was collected by Rudy Chernich. There's one or two that have been collected or donated by other individuals, but Rudy was one of our former curators. And he basically built the entire Northwest Gallery we have in here and all the display cases. He converted this building from a building used to store logging equipment and sort of a utility shed after that into a functional gallery with an office. And so all these display cases in here, basically Rudy said, we need to be able to show Northwest material, and specifically we need to be able to show zeolites. Zeolites were Rudy Chernich's passion. So one specimen we have in here that is not the most flashy of specimens, but is interesting for that reason, is Chernichite. So Rudy Chernich had a mineral named after him for his contributions to the mineral world, particularly in the area of zeolites. The YouTube channel currently Rock Hounding, Jared and Sarah came out and did some filming out here, and they're gonna be talking a lot about zeolites. And I believe that comes out in the next week or so. So they're gonna go into the details on Rudy Chernich, zeolites, the museum zeolite collection, some behind the scene things, some gift store finds, so quite a lot of this stuff. But some of these zeolites aesthetically are just outstanding. I really like this stilbite back here, the pink one that looks kind of like a worm. I think that one's really interesting, and I wish I knew more about the locality. Unfortunately, when that one was donated, all I know is it's from Washington.
I really like the mesolite.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that tourmaline.
Yeah, that same spray sort of shaped thing going on, yeah.
Yeah, we'll leave this case for Jared to go over.
Yeah. Golisite and the stilbite in here, the pink mineral and the colorless needles. So this is all real minerals in a recreation of a vug. Vug's what we call the underground hole. So this was found in India. Someone was digging for a water well. They broke into this and found this amazing little cavern full of basically magical looking crystals. They took photos, they collected all the crystals and minerals and safely packed them up, and then they finished digging their water well because that was the point, that they had chosen that location because that's where they needed to find a water well. So everything was packed up, shipped back here, and Rudy and the museum built basically this paper mache area you'll see in here. So this is actually a big diorama, a big craft project. Used the pictures and put all the minerals back in the way that they matched the pictures, and this gives you the feeling of what it would feel like to, find by surprise.
Yeah, I can't imagine digging into
a giant pocket. So we've got a display of sunstones in here, Oregon State Gem, and you'll notice the display is a little sparse right now because a lot of these have traveled to some recent shows, the Portland Regional Show and the Denver Gem and Mineral Show. And so they're not all back out on display. There's a lot of other colorful ones to see in here. But even the ones that are in here are some pretty outstanding pieces of gem carving and faceting. Sunstones can cover this whole color range from the champagne color to a green color to a red color. And we try and show all of those in our collection here. As well as we've got a great piece for people who haven't been out to the field to collect sunstones, to be able to show kind of like how does it happen that there's a spot in Oregon where you can just walk out there and find crystals that have weathered out of rock on the top of the ground. And so this is, I like to point this out to them and say like, well, look at this piece of basalt, you know, look how it's kind of crumbly, look how you could imagine those crystals just sort of weathering right out. Those ones you were just looking at were faceted by Bill Harvey, who actually was Charlene Harvey, the daughter of Richard and Helen Rice, her husband. So, you know, it's one of those things that through the generations, there's a lot of family connections in some of the stuff here. So there's a couple pieces in here faceted by, let's see, Carl Zildner, who's one of the local guild members. There's some stuff in here by Daryl Alexander, who is not a local guild member, but a very talented gem carver and faceter who does a lot of unique sort of fantasy cuts and bubble cuts.
Did he also make this central piece here?
No, this one was by Dalen Hargrave. And that one's on loan to us from Cascade Gems. But that's got two little polar bears in there, a parent and a child, that have been carved into that. And then the rest of the stone is basically just sort of polished a little around the edges, but that's got some great schiller, the copper in there that you can see. And then the rest, the white and the silver material were all built around it to sort of create the artwork that makes it look like sort of an Arctic scene. Bernie's one of the enigmatic faces that you'll see here. If you kind of look up there, you can see Bernie's waving at you when you come into this gallery. So Bernie is a thalattosaur, an animal from before dinosaurs, so an aquatic reptile, older than dinosaurs, that was found in the state of Oregon. This is a 3D printed version of Bernie. It's an accurate reproduction of Bernie. So Bernie's bones were 3D scanned and 3D printed and then assembled. So Bernie was found by a woman named Gloria Carr, and her father, Greg Carr, is also an amateur paleontologist, and so he volunteers here at the museum sometimes, but also is a member of the NARG, North American Research Group, fossil club around here in the Northwest. He also volunteers at OMSI, and so he works in their fossil prep lab there, so he prepped the bones that they found and collected at OMSI, 3D scanned them. They have been sent off, the original bones have been sent off to University of Alaska, where someone is doing a thesis paper on them right now, because we think that Bernie is a new species of thalattosaur that hasn't been seen before. And then 3D printed this and offered it to us here at the museum and said, would you like to have Bernie hanging from the ceiling in your Northwest Gallery? And, you know, I said, absolutely.
How can you say no to that?
Right. So the one thing I'll say is the eyeballs those would represent the kind of eyes that an animal like Bernie would have, but don't forget that Bernie would have had, like, you know, skin and eyelids. So that expression is maybe not completely what you would expect to see, but that is the size of eyeball you would expect to see and the type of eyeball you'd expect to see from an eye socket like that. One of the things you can tell about Bernie, maybe from the shape of his hands, his hands and feet here, is he's aquatic. So this would have been in a near-shore, shallow sea environment. This part of Oregon, when Bernie lived there, would have been completely underwater. So this is a swimming animal, not a walking animal. So really like a large alligator crocodile type animal. And there's a bunch of different species of thalattosaur. And the one thing that makes us think that Bernie is probably a different species is actually the curve to his skull. You can see he's sort of got like more of a hooked curved skull going on there in the shape. And that is somewhat unique, although they've been found with curved skulls before. One of the coolest things that I see in this skull that has been shown to me is this extra, so he's got, the teeth on the outside here. He has this extra set of teeth here inside. So this is, roof of the mouth sort of teeth here. And the teeth are pointing backwards. The teeth are pointing inwards towards the throat down here. So what this means to us is Bernie would have eaten live prey, not been a scavenger, because these teeth, if you were a fish or a snake or something and someone had eaten you or swallowed you and you're trying to escape, these teeth would catch you on the way out and these would keep you swallowed. The opalescence color in there looks like the northern lights. And so this is called Aurora Borealis, and the artist thought that it'd be nice to show what it would look like if you could see the Aurora Borealis over Mount Hood. So this is Contralou's Precious Opal. It's got the play of color. It was mined in Morrow County, Opal Butte. And the artist is Thomas Ames.
And that was the same one as...
So this locality, the locality where that opal came from is the same locality that this thunder egg that we call Meatball came from. Call it Meatball, looks like a meatball. So this is not cut, and we speculate all the time about what might be inside. So there could be opal as fine and as precious and beautiful as that inside, or this could be a mud ball, and essentially it's a bunch of smaller thunder eggs stuck together, or it could be a combination of the two. So you can see all the small thunder eggs on the outside. You can see some of them that have been, sort of broken open already, and you can see probably what it would look like inside of those, but that doesn't necessarily tell you what is in the center of the piece. So if you were to look at the back side of the world's largest opal-filled thunder egg over by the door, you'll see this same texture, this same bumpy texture that looks like a lot of thunder eggs cut together or glued together. So Meatball could have the same sort of thing in the middle, like the opal in the middle of that one over there, or could have material like this. This is also from Opal Butte. Looks like a bird, so there could also be, opal in the shape of a bird inside. You never know. Or you could have material like this. This is probably one of our fanciest, best thunder eggs, because you've got 4 different kinds of opal in here. You've got some precious opal, you've got fire opal, you've got the clear, highlight opal, or some people call it jelly opal, and you've got common opal. Probably could even come up with more names for other types of opal in there, but at least 4. So our collection, we've got a bunch of Northwest material, and then we've got some worldwide thunder eggs over there. One kind of cool thing that happens when we take exhibits, or just when I go to local rock shows, is I will sometimes see a thunder egg that I recognize from the collection. So like this one over here, 7 thunder eggs together, is a pretty noteworthy collection of thunder eggs that they're stuck together and they got cut like that. I went to the Portland Regional Show and looked at all the other cases, and I saw this thunder egg, but I didn't bring this thunder egg with me. So the cool thing about all these is to think, hey, there's two halves to each one. So the person who had cut and polished this thunder egg and donated to the museum, it says donated by Rudy Schernich, but the person who had done the cutting, Tom Wilson, had an exhibit there, and so he has the other half of this thunder egg. So I like to think about that sometimes, that all of these might have another half out there somewhere that someone else has too. Thunder eggs are Oregon state rock, and the name thunder egg is not what you would call them everywhere in the world. That's really a Pacific Northwest name for them. So if you're saying to yourself you never heard of thunder eggs before, they're also known more scientifically as lithophasy. And the thunder egg itself is the structure. So
This one or something.
yeah, so like you see the cracked open space inside this rhyolite shell. So what's inside is an agate a lot of times, or other minerals can form in there, but the explosive sort of like cracked open shape in the center that has later been filled in by mineral-rich water depositing mineral, that whole package is a thunder egg, and that particular formation. So that's what's special to Oregon. We have many of these in Oregon. They form in rhyolite lava. We have some pretty significant rhyolite lava flows here, but Oregon's not the only place in the world where there's rhyolite lava, any place where you end up with rhyolite lava with a big thickness of it, a big flow of it, there's a possibility you might find thunder eggs.
And some of those are over.
Yeah. So we've got some from Poland here, Australia, Germany. Some of these you would call geodes. It's a geode when there's a hole in there because, like I said, the thunder egg is the structure. So a thunder egg can also be a geode. So a couple programs we have, museum membership. It's a really great deal. Elvis, when I see people that say, I want to come back, it does not take very many visits before you might as well just buy a membership. So free membership for a year for one person is $30. Pretty good deal. Membership also gets you, you're the first to know about any events that we have here. We have members only hours that every other month or so we'll do a special event that is just for members, like maybe coffee and donuts with the collections manager, me, in the main gallery, and you can ask questions, or we'll have, we've got a garage sale coming up where we're going to be selling items to benefit the museum, all rocks and minerals, but members get first picks, so the first hour of the sale is only open to members. Local rock clubs also, most of them have club memberships, and so they also benefit from that sort of stuff too. So we got membership programs. We also have Adopt a Mineral, which is a really fun program. Adopt a Mineral, you get to have your name next to something in the gallery for a year, and you'll get little updates from us and a picture of your specimen and info page about your specimen, with a little more in-depth information. And we've got like a student rate for that and an adult rate for that. You'll see those little things that say, I was adopted by so-and-so. Or sometimes they have special messages on them. Like, I was adopted for my first birthday is one of my favorites that I enjoy getting to put that one out. It was someone who had a baby named Jasper. And so they wanted to adopt a piece of Jasper for their, to represent their kid. We're open Wednesday through Sundays, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. We have an Instagram account and a Facebook account. RiceNorthwestMuseum.org is our website. So yeah, any of those, you should be able to find a way to contact us. I can also, if you want, give you a email address. I guess it'd be info@ricenorthwestmuseum.org. Everything's spelled out.